When dementia takes your memories, what happens to your identity? And what if the world around you never truly saw it in the first place? Neil Cutler lost his husband to dementia. Now he's using that grief and lived experience to advocate for older LGBT people facing a system that still too often forgets who they are, even before the diagnosis does. If you are caring for someone else, whether paid or unpaid, and no matter how many hours you do it, did you realise that you may be missing out on thousands of pounds of discounts for things that you may use every day? The Able to Care podcast is proud to be sponsored by the UK's #1 carers card. Started by two best friends who recognise that carers deserve better and are 100% committed to helping to change the lives of all carers and bringing them together as a strong community. Carers Card UK provides support, recognition and rewards. It offers reassurance by providing an ID card that helps access emergency information when needed, while also unlocking discounts, a wellbeing hub, a carers circle tool and a community through their app. All of this for less than the price of a box of chocolates a year. There are discounts on gym membership, days out, electrical goods, clothing and even glasses. Let others know you care while taking a little care of yourself with an ID card you can be proud of. Visit carerscarduk.co.uk/promo code/able to care today to order yours. Hello and welcome back to the Able to Care podcast. I'm your host, Andy Baker, and today we're having one of the most moving, necessary and often overlooked conversations in dementia care, what it means to be LGBT and live with dementia. Our guest, Neil Cutler, a compassionate advocate, presenter and trustee of Dementia Forward, where he leads on diversity, equity and inclusion. But Neil also speaking from lived experience. His late husband developed dementia, and Neil's story of love, care and the challenges they face together is both deeply personal and widely relevant. In this episode, we'll explore how dementia uniquely impacts older gay men and the broader LGBT plus community, from care home experiences and healthcare discrimination to identity, legacy and love. Neil is currently working to create mandatory accredited LGBT plus dementia awareness training for health and care providers. And he recently received a Diversity in Dementia Award at the Dementia in Care Awards 2025. This isn't just a conversation about dementia. It's about dignity. It's about belonging. It's about remembering who people are, even when they begin to forget. So Neil, thank you so much for being here. Would you be willing to share a little bit about your husband, who he was before dementia, and what your journey together looked like as his condition progressed?
So I first met John in 1973 in Windsor. I was still with my earlier partner in those days, and our relationship was beginning to crumble. It was a long-distance one, and let's face it, long-distance relationships do struggle at the best of times. And we got more together in February 74 and moved in together in June 74. John was 9 years older than me, which is something I talk about, and he'd come from a very difficult family background. However, he was working for Barrett's, the shoe people in those days. He was manager of the shop in Windsor, where he was based. And as I say, we got together. He decided to transfer to a different shop when we moved in together because we lived in Watford, where I was working. And from the outset, he'd always created this straight persona. I suppose that's the best way to describe it, where he always maintained we were cousins. He'd been married before. He had a daughter. He was Jewish. There were a whole range of things that he kept on about. But after about 15, the first 15 years were wonderful, although we did struggle at times, but the first 15 years were really good. And after about 15 years, he then had a really bad nervous breakdown, which I think was part of him trying to continually hide things all the time. After he'd had that, he changed him considerably. He was a bit more difficult at times. So when dementia was diagnosed in 2014, I'd not really been aware of his deterioration as such. He Well, I retired early from the NHS in 2002 when we moved up to North Yorkshire. And I suppose when I look back of it, most probably the last 10 years of his life were really difficult, and the last 3 were really awful. As time wore on, he got more forgetful, more difficult to actually hold a conversation with. And once he was diagnosed with dementia, he really lost the will to live in a way. It just seemed as though he'd been fighting all his life to hide behind various things. And in a way, he'd been unmasked, because people have real difficulty coming to terms with and accepting that they've got dementia. It's not something you want to do easily. You just put it down to, oh, no, I've just had a memory blip. But yes, he really struggled. He had 2 periods of care in the mental health unit at Harrogate Hospital, which were done under the auspices of, we need to sort out your medication, it's not working, because he was on meds for a number of things. Not only had he had a heart attack, he developed diabetes, he suffered with psoriasis, he had 1 or 2 other complications which were difficult for him. So when he went into the care home, he really struggled. He wasn't able to do anything for himself. He had to have staff look after him. And that's another thing which I touch on, is that for members of the gay community going into care, a large proportion of care staff are female. And it's very difficult for members of the gay community in particular to be nursed by female care staff. But I got into the habit when he first went in, if I just sat on his bed and let him do what was necessary, and then ask a member of staff, a male member of staff, to come and assist, he slowly but surely accepted that. But it wasn't easy, because whenever I'd go and visit him in the care home, the first thing he'd say to me was, I need to go to the toilet. And you just thought, yes, but if I don't go tomorrow for some unknown reason, A, you won't remember I haven't been, but B, you won't have been to the toilet. So, yes, so there were all those other sorts of things to think about. And as I always say, and I know this is a bit flippant, but he died on Remembrance Sunday 2015. And I had lots of phone calls in the morning, because I always took the dog for a walk first thing, to say that I needed to get to the care home quickly. But I eventually got to the care home about 10:30. And they very kindly dressed him, laid him out. He looked really comfortable on his bed in his room. And I said to him, you are a fool. I said, if you'd have waited till 11 o'clock, you could have had 2 minutes silence and a 21-gun salute. Which for once he didn't answer.
It's amazing you're able to get that, that level of flippantness in that moment.
Yeah. But it was, actually, every time I'd been to the care home, it was really a tearful journey home. But on that particular day, when he passed away, do you know what? I know this sounds awful, but I really jumped for joy. Yes. Yeah. I just felt, oh, thank God that's all come to an end. Because if he'd broken a leg, I could have coped with it. But with dementia, it's not 9 till 5, Monday to Friday. It's 24/7. You don't get any respite. He'd seen off most of our friends because he didn't want them interfering or nosing, because he just felt that whenever they visited, they were pinching things. But that's another sign of his dementia. Fortunately, Dementia Forward were really supportive. We had an Admiral nurse in those days, and she used to visit periodically and have a long chat with him, which just gave me a couple of hours respite while he was talking to her. I could pop off and do 1 or 2 other things. But it was really, really difficult without support to do things on your own. Yes, I could take him into town, but it was really difficult to get him around the shops. And then of an evening time, he'd want to go to bed at 8 o'clock. You still had a load of things to do because it was only me to do it. But there again, at 4 o'clock, he'd be awake and want a cup of tea. And you just think, oh, crumbs, please, just give me 5 minutes. But no, it's really, really difficult. Yeah.
Was that when you were still, was he still living with you at that point? Is that before going to care or you? Yeah.
Yes.
One thing you mentioned there. Sorry, carry on, Neil.
He had a 3-week period of care in hospital. He was then home for 12 weeks. He went back in for another 4 weeks and then went into care, where he was only there for 9 weeks. And I think by that point, strange though it may seem, he just lost the will to live. I don't know whether he knew exactly what was happening, but I just think his system had just decided, no, even I can't cope with this. And he just turned off. I really do. Yeah. I mean, we'd done 41 years by then.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
There's something that you said there that kind of just made me think. You sort of said, I felt guilty, or you were then worrying about not being able to make it the following day, because then not only you said, yes, he may not remember me being there, but then would he have been able to go to the toilet? That must have been a real change in dynamics. And there must have been a lot of feelings you went through that, going, I don't know, a strange sensation to imagine of like wanting to be there for him as a partner, but feeling sort of a bit overwhelmed as a carer. What would you say changed most for you in the relationship in that journey that you went through?
It's difficult to put a finger on it. I just felt as though I was just sort of a carer, and that was it. I just had to be there for him all the time. I suppose even during our relationship, yes, he'd always done the washing and the ironing and the cleaning. So I needed to do all of that. But he'd never cleaned windows, for example. He never washed his car. I always washed his car, did all the gardening and all those sorts of things. And I suppose working in the health service, I know I wasn't in the caring sector of health service. I was in estates management and maintenance. But you always felt that you were always in a caring environment. And I just felt, well, whether he did or didn't love me, I'm never too sure. But I just felt that I did love him, and therefore I needed to make sure that he could have the best that I could get for him, to make sure that his journey was comfortable. And I knew that dementia was most probably going to be the end for him. And when he went into the care home, of course, we had to change GPs because we didn't have, he was in Knaresborough, we lived in Ripon. And the GP phoned me up and she said to me one day, now, do you want him to have a flu jab? So I said, well, will that make him any better? So she said, well, no. So she said, if he develops any crises, do you want us to intervene? I said, well, is it going to make him any better? So she said, well, no. So I said, well, in that case, why don't we just let matters take their course? And from my experience in healthcare all those years, normally January, February time, you get unfortunate incidents in care homes because the clients were kept in close proximity. And I just thought, yes, well, come January, February, that would most probably be it. I'd resigned myself to that fact, but I didn't want him to continue to suffer and struggle, because he obviously was. I mean, he couldn't do anything for himself. And he was always very keen to make sure he was absolutely smart, well-dressed. Or I didn't always agree with his dress, but he was always smart, clean, well-dressed. He always presented well when he went out. And it was just a shame to see him sort of in tracksuit whilst he was in a care home, not looking himself. So yes. Yeah, difficult times.
Yeah, it sounds it, Neil. And thank you for sharing the story. There's something that kind of obviously immediately kind of sprung to me as you were talking about the journey there. Obviously, you said that John kind of masked his sexuality and lived this kind of persona as being a straight man. Did that cause problems then related to his dementia?
Not so sure about that. I think he was badly treated by his family. They didn't accept him. He was the youngest by one of 7 children, which was difficult for him. Because he was 9 years older than me, when partial decriminalisation of homosexuality came about in 1967, he was in his 30s. So he'd had a really difficult childhood and young adulthood. And unfortunately, due to the increase in police activity following partial decriminalisation, he was caught in a compromising situation in a public toilet in Cardiff. And I think all that weighed heavily on his mind. And I think when dementia sets in, it puts you back to those scary times. So he might have been sort of looking at other people, male fellow people in care, as people who might have gay bashed him or been very abusive towards him. So I think that was really difficult for him. And the one fortunate thing about the care home where he was, the activities coordinator was a fully fledged member of the gay community. There's no two ways about that. Lovely chap, absolutely smashing. So he knew what the situation was. So I always felt comfortable that he was in there and he could keep an eye on John. But I don't think that that's always the case in all care homes. I mean, one of the prime examples was when I used to go to the care home in the afternoon, staff were usually a bit thin because of changing shifts and lunch, but they'd serve tea about 3:00, tea and a biscuit for everybody. So I would just help to serve the tea and a biscuit. It only took 10 minutes. and they had a number of day areas. So therefore, your loved one wasn't in the same day area every day. They were moving them around, which I always thought was a really nice thing to do. And he was in this small sitting room, and there was another couple there, elderly couple. The husband was living with dementia. His wife was there with him. And I served them their tea, and then I went and got John and I and sat down. And she turned round, she said to me, "How do you know John?" I said, "Oh, we're civil partners. We've been together 41 years. "Oh, that's that." She said, turned around and never spoke to us ever again. So those are the sort of things that you get from people of our own age group in care homes. And that can be reflected through the people that they're caring for. So yes, it's always a bit vulnerable. We always feel a bit vulnerable if we're in care homes where there are people like that. But I can understand that because that's their upbringing and that's where they've come from.
Yeah, I suppose it's that the same way that you're going to get a potential disorientation to places of maybe, being scary and a lack of acceptance. You've also got the people in the home that are going back to a place where they're going back to their preconceived prejudicial ways that they may have moved forwards later in life, but they're then regressing back themselves as well. That must be challenging. So we often talk about kind of person-centered care, and I'm sure you've heard that term many times, but for many individuals, within the LGBT plus community, their identity has never been fully seen in the first place. Is that something that impacts as far as dementia care? And is that one of the reasons you're kind of advocating for that?
Yes, I suppose so. And I think what care providers need to appreciate is the history of the gay community in particular. And I think when dementia sets in, they need to realise that for a number of us, it puts us back to scary times. All right, we don't need to go back to the Roman times, but we do need to go back to recent times. And if we go back to 1967, which isn't that long ago, there was partial decriminalisation of homosexuality for same-sex couples. We couldn't have any intimacy unless we were in a private place. You couldn't go and have a dirty weekend in a hotel, for example, or a guest house. They weren't classed as private. And I say partial decriminalisation in 1967, and that only applied to England and Wales. Scotland was 1980 and Ireland was 1982, Northern Ireland, that is. And for the armed services and the merchant navy, for them, that didn't happen until the year 2000. So, yes, it was really difficult for other sections. And again, it was only for males aged 21 and over in 1967. It reduced, in the 1990s to 18, but we didn't get equality until post-millennium, when it's now 16 for everybody.
Yeah.
So we need to bear that in mind. We then had in 1988, the government of Margaret Thatcher introduced a local government bill in which Section 28 outlawed discussing same-sex relationships in schools, colleges, and all sorts of other public utilities. So that put us back a bit. Then we had the AIDS crisis, which was really, really difficult and classed everybody as paedophiles and perverts, which was really difficult. And then the World Health Organization didn't declassify being gay as a mental illness until 1990, but that wasn't enacted in the UK until 1992. So in recent times, we've had a really difficult time coming to terms with life. And for the gay community in particular, we're the ones that have had the legislative restrictions. Being lesbian, you can still do what you like, you always could. Bisexuals got away with it left, right and centre. Fine, good for them. And the trans community, although it's having difficulties currently, has never been criminalised. So for the gay community, it's a really, really difficult one. And for people of my age in particular, it puts us back to all those scary times. And it's still not going to be easy for people in their 50s and 60s because it will still put them back to scary times. I mean, times have only improved since the millennium when youngsters these days come out. We'd never have come out. It would have been absolutely horrendous. So, yeah, difficult times. But we do need, and care providers need to understand that history. When I do my presentations, that's the first bit I talk about because I think it's really key that they get that understanding before we sort of go on to how then it affects people of my age group when dementia sets in and puts us back to scary times. And in this part of the world, in particular, in rural communities, where men have been forced down a straight route because they've got to manage the family farm or they've got to do this because it's a family business. When dementia sets in, it puts them back to those times when they didn't really want that. They're coming to terms with their sexuality. And I know of cases where the male half of the marriage has been in care and the wife has visited and the care home staff have said to him, oh, whatever his name was, your wife's here. Wife? I haven't got a wife. No, because his mind's back to the time when he didn't want a wife. So it's really, really difficult for people to understand that dementia puts you back to those times when you were coming to terms with your sexuality, what life meant, and for a lot of people, trying to hide a large portion of their life. And it puts them into those scary times when dementia sets in. Yeah.
What sort of things can care homes do to help to facilitate that, help to better understand? What sort of things do you promote?
Well, that's why I do the talks that I do, why I do the work that I do with Claudio Dolorito, who's a super wonderful research psychologist at the University College in London. We do a lot of work together. And a whole group of us that are just trying to raise awareness and to make it mandatory for care providers, all care providers, to have mandatory training in LGBT awareness, where we've come from, where we're going to, and not just to be a computer-based thing. It needs face-to-face because, unfortunately, when you do computer-based, it's very difficult to, especially if it's a large group, to get the facial recognition and the things going on, but how people are taking that in and interpreting it. Yeah. And I think it's much better if you can do it in a face-to-face situation whereby you can have questions and ask questions and tell people exactly how it's affected you. All right, it might affect other people in different ways, and it most probably would. But I think it's better that they can have it from a person that's a lived experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I'm obviously running a training company and working with Dementia Forward. I thoroughly advocate the importance of face-to-face training. It does make a big difference. Yeah, well, absolutely. Yeah, that's my bread and butter. But it does have an impact. It is having those conversations, being able to actually explore, create some cognitive dissonance. Because I should imagine there's two sides to it, isn't there? That, there is obviously some element of prejudice still out there against the LGBT community, especially from, workers who maybe not be UK originally and things like that. There may be some challenges around there based on different cultures. But you've also got the sort of individuals who are within the LGBT community that, are kind of proposing you should be open, you should be out, you should be proud, you shouldn't be ashamed, but they may not know how to support somebody who's regressing back to a time when it was dangerous to be open and out. And is that both sides? Is that something that kind of the training and stuff covers, looking at raising awareness for all parties?
Yes, it does in a way. Yes, because we talk about how the dementia would sort of push us back to bad times. There are still areas of the country where it's still not easy to be open. Yeah. And especially in areas where they were large sort of mining communities or industrial communities where you had to be butch and manly and being gay was not a done thing. Yeah. So that's difficult. And then, of course, as you touched on, we do have the cultural issues. We have some wonderful, wonderful people that come into care from around the world. But when they come on duty, they really must leave their cultural differences behind and respect that we have moved on a lot and we are much more open and accepting. And we need to bear in mind that there are still 71 countries where being a member of the LGBT community is illegal, and 10 countries that still have the death penalty on the statute, whereby if you're caught in a compromising situation, you lose more than whatever, you lose your life if you're not careful. So it's really important that we understand all of that. Now, I'm going to go at people that come from other countries because they do provide a wonderful service. They are really caring, but it is really important when they come on duty. And it's up to care home staff when taking people on to talk that through with care staff that come from these countries. and make sure that they do respect that. Because for people from my community living with dementia, it's bad enough living with dementia, but then having somebody that's not really on your side, it makes life even more awkward. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there things that, so commonly when sort of care settings, for instance, they're organising activities or things to do, obviously they tend to focus, on a fairly generic group of kind of activities or environments and things like that. Do you think there's something missing? So I used to work a long time ago, Neil. In a past life, I was in within the pub industry. And we actually, as an organisation, as a pub, it was a gay night that we started running. We connected with a number of local sort of gay advocacy groups and things like that to support and things like that. So we started running the gay nights, and it was something that was very important to the individuals within my local area and stuff to have. It was kind of the first pub that kind of offered it and did something. It was partly because from a slightly prejudicial way, the owner said there's a lot of money in the pink pound. So it's a case of a little bit of...
there's a lot of money in the pink pound. Definitely.
Absolutely. So it's from a social point of view, but there was a real lovely sense of community that developed around that particular night. I worked a lot of those nights and made some good friends there. And I know that's something that was important to people within that community, that it was I think sometimes we always found it interesting when people came in that were outside of that community into the evening. There was still prejudice that I never realised existed really of kind of, it was more kind of groups that would be a little bit more, or sometimes you see sort of people come in and be a little bit, well, this looks a bit different this evening and stuff. And they were absolutely fine once they realised what was going on. But I think it was that the acceptance that they felt and the safety they felt within that environment. Do you think care homes should have more opportunities for individuals who are within that community to provide them activities, circumstances, things to do that is in line with that sort of element of pride, or do you think it should stay generic?
No, I think I sort of make the point that when we members of the LGBT community are looking for care, we need to feel that we are in a safe space and an accepting space. And we need to see on their website or when we go to visit the care home, if we're looking for care, signs and symbols that shows that it's all inclusive. Perhaps a pride flag. And they also ought to, I think, try and get involved in Pride in some way or another. It's the whole month. I know it's usually the whole of June, although Leeds Pride was yesterday. But we also have History Month, which is February, which is where the LGBT communities come from, where it hopes to go to. So there are lots of other activities. In Yorkshire, for example, on the 1st of August, everybody's got their Yorkshire flag out. So why can't we do the same in that particular area where the care home is? They might do something for their county organisation. Why can't we do something for the gay community in that area? There most probably are gay organisations in that particular area. Google's a wonderful thing. If you Google it, and you could most probably create some links with that organisation, with the care home, so that the members of the LGBT community could be encouraged perhaps to join those activities. They might, even if the care home is able to take the person to that particular place, like your pub, for example. So, yes, I think there's things that care homes can do. They're inclined to be a bit insular and a bit sort of straight at times because that's the easy option. But as we've said, there's money in the pink pound. So, yes, let's try and use it. And I don't think it's a good idea, personally, to have specialist LGBT care homes. I think that's just a recipe for disaster in my way of thinking. All right, it might work in the gay village in Manchester. It might work in the gay village in London, but it wouldn't work in this neck of the woods. I don't think we'd have bricks through the window, but people would be going, oh, we're not going there. So I think it needs to be integrated as much as possible. And it needs the care home to try and find out what's in the locality and talk to them. And even get people like myself to come along periodically and give talks to groups which could include the staff. We've got a British Legion care home in Ripon, Lister House, and obviously it's contact and context with the LGBT community are really difficult because, as I said earlier, the armed services and the merchant navy were still sexually discriminated again up until 1990. So it's really important that we do touch with those, because there will be lots of servicemen that were forced, if that's the right word, down the straight route, that now dementia's setting in are becoming to sort of think, oh, who's that person over there? I didn't have a wife. And who's those children? So yes, it's a difficult one, and it's a difficult one for Leicester House. And I've done a lot of their LGBT awareness training there. And through the York LGBT Forum, which is a voluntary organisation in the main, we do a lot of social activities for various sections of the community to make it more inclusive. It's based in York, and of course, in most university cities in particular, they've always got a good gay community. So, yes, it needs those sort of things to get involved. And through York LGBT Forum, there's 4 of us that do a programme called Free to Be Me in Care, which talks about all various aspects of the LGBT community. We touch on how would you identify a person when you wouldn't, would you? Because it's not stamped on your head. And we touch on human resources and human relations. We do a whole gambit of stuff. And we have a member of the trans community, a trans person, Martina, that talks about their life, how they came to terms with the fact that they needed to transition. And bless them, they nearly committed suicide twice because they couldn't come to terms with their relationship. They'd actually got married and had a family, and that made it even more difficult for them. So there's all sorts of examples of struggles within the LGBT community, which a number of us are willing to talk to. A lot of members of my community and my age group have gone through similar that John and I did, but they don't want to talk about it because they're still not open in their either families or the areas where they live. So there's only silly old me at the moment that's banging the drum, but I will keep banging that for as long as I can.
Have you ever encountered an adult or child's behaviour that has felt difficult, overwhelming, or challenging? Have you sometimes felt at a loss of what to do, or know that you didn't handle it quite right? People are complex and unpredictable, and their behaviour can be like the weather. We've all made the mistake of looking out the window and feeling safe to wear shorts, but 5 minutes later wishing for an umbrella. What if, like a weatherman, you understood how humidity, temperature and pressure all come together to cause the weather, allowing you to better prepare, predict and respond, and prevent ever having a picnic ruined by a thunderstorm ever again? My book, called Targeting the Positive with Behaviours that Challenge, helps you to become the weatherman of behaviour. It provides you with a toolkit to increase competency, confidence, resilience and empathy, so you feel more assured about how to respond to distressed or dysregulated behaviours in others, including those affected by trauma, mental health, neurodiversity, learning disabilities or dementia. Build better connections, achieve de-escalation and improve outcomes for yourself and those you engage with my celebrated 6-stage target model, a step-by-step process to reduce distress for everyone. Discover my empowering, person-centered guide in Targeting the Positive, written by me, Andy Baker, available from online bookstores worldwide. Find a link in the description and order today. Obviously, with John, you said that he was a little bit quiet and cousins. Were you cousins to the end? Is that how he always kind of presented you and referred to you? Yeah.
I mean, our real friends knew what the situation was, but he still kept this pretense up. He still kept this little closet round himself. Yes.
Yeah. And did that affect him when you went to visit and things like that? Did you have to be mindful of that from your point of view?
And we had difficulties when he was in Harrogate Hospital, because there were a number of staff from other cultures that weren't at all accepting, and he was treated rather poorly. They'd bang his dinner down in front of him and walk off and leave him with a knife and a fork. Well, he got to the stage where he didn't know what to do with a knife and fork.
Yeah.
So, and then the senior staff would say, "Oh, John's not eaten again today." So I said, "Oh, well, I'll come over tomorrow and see why." So I'd go over at lunchtime. And yes, again, that particular person just banged the dinner down and walked off, left him with a knife and a fork. And I thought, no, he needs some encouragement. So I say to him, "Do you not recognise that then?" "No, what's that?" I said, "Well, that's your favourite. It's winter stew." I said, "You'll love that." "Will I?" "Ah, right." So I'd go and find a spoon and a fork, and he was happy, and he'd eat it.
Yeah.
But with the care staff in those days, I'm going back 10 years now, and hopefully it's improved. But if you hadn't eaten it within 15 minutes, it was taken away.
Yeah.
And that's where it all falls over. They need that encouragement to make them to eat and to do things. But of course, once he was in the care home with the activities coordinator, being a member of the gay community in particular, that made life so much better. And his mother worked in the laundry at the care home. The care home had its own laundry. She worked in the laundry and she knew what the situation was. And she kept an eye on him, made sure he'd always got his clean clothes. And the activities coordinator kept an eye on him. So I felt really comfortable that he was in the care home. Yes, and I think they really looked after him. And I knew that sometimes it could be really draining going every day visiting. And they used to say to me, "No, you've got to have a day off. Don't worry about it. Just have a day off." But even then, you still feel guilty that, "Well, I haven't been today. I hope he's all right." But you knew very well that if the activities coordinator and his mother were on duty, he'd be fine. He'd be fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I suppose that's a big part of it, isn't it? It's not just for the individual themselves that's being cared for and supported. It's also the loved ones, knowing that their loved one is somewhere safe and supported and accepted unconditionally and things like that, isn't it? So that's the importance of promoting that inclusivity within the organisation itself. That's really interesting, Neil. So obviously you've spoken quite a lot there about the training that you're offering and that you're trying to kind of advocate for it and raise awareness of it. Do you think that, as you said, you feel a bit alone that you're the only one banging the drum on this?
Oh, I've got Fiona on my side now. Bless her.
Absolutely, yeah, and the Able training team as well. Yes. We're behind you as well, Neil.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
Absolutely. And I think it was interesting what you said there as far as, the story you just mentioned there about John's experience with the food, I would say, unfortunately, is probably more common than ever it should be. And to lots of different people, not just those in the LGBT community. However, I think that then we have to be mindful of their, still elements of prejudice or prejudicial treatment and stuff that's not going to improve it. It's only going to exacerbate those problems on top of the problems that were already there, aren't they? And I think that's where, well, that happened to my mum and she doesn't, she's not in that community. Yeah, but it's the additional prejudicial things add to that. They're more likely to experience it from certain people, unfortunately. So what would be your hope moving forwards as far as, you've turned your grief into purpose on this journey. What would you say are the most important things that both families and maybe care homes can be doing to help their loved ones, particularly those from the LGBT community?
Well, I suppose for a start, the families need to be accepting of that person and their sexuality. Mm-hmm. Let's face it, we don't choose it. It's the way we're made.
Yeah.
And we can't help those that we love. That's just life. So we need to make sure that the families are accepted. We do have big instances in the trans community, for example, where trans people have been bereaved. And bereavement's not about death, it's about loss, where they're bereaved from their families. And they really struggle. They don't have the best mental health anyway because of the difficulties that they find themselves in. And when they do develop dementia, one day they're in their pre-transition state and the next day they're in their transition state, which makes it even more difficult for care home staff and carers in particular to look after them and make sure that they're well cared for. So that's going to be a real challenge for the future. I think for the future, for the youngsters these days, life's a lot easier for them. They can be open and honest and people are a lot more accepting. But for the older community, yes, I think we are accepted because people have become a lot more accepting, but there are still older sections of the current population that are still anti anyway, and we're always going to have those.
Yeah.
But it's essential for families to realise that their loved one has led a very difficult life at times, and when they're in their last years, they need to feel that they're comfortable, cared for respectfully, and looked after in a way that actually makes the last few years comfortable. Yes, it can be really difficult for families to sometimes accept that. Sometimes it's even more difficult because their LGBT family member has moved a long way away because it was the only way they could survive was to get away from the family, or they were thrown out of the family. So they've made friends, relations and contacts in other areas. But of course, there comes a time when those people don't count when you're looking for care. And it's essential, if you've actually had a good relationship and you're in a good caring relationship, that you develop or enter into a civil partnership, because that gives you the protection that your loved one needs. If they need care, you can actually speak for them. Whereas if you're just in a relationship, they can't necessarily speak for you. The health service might be forced to find a family member to talk about, and then they might not want to be involved, or they won't see that your care needs are what your loved one wants for you. So it's important, where you possibly can, do a will, enter into civil partnership, and make sure that all those bits are in place, so that if your loved one does need care, they'll get what you want them to get. So yes, it's not easy, but you need to try and do it. Unfortunately for John and I, we were in a civil partnership, so when he needed care, I could just step in and do whatever. The other thing that I found really difficult, like when he was in hospital and he was being not the best treated, do you go and take that up with the ward staff and have a bit of a shindig in a quiet place? How do you think your loved one's going to be treated when you're not there? So yes, it's really difficult at times to get that balance.
Yeah,
we've got to do it. We've got to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, there was something that you mentioned there, actually, as far as the it's something I've acknowledged, that some people do have a closer relationship with members of their friendship community than necessarily their family. But then family are the ones who are often considered to be the most listened to, but I've been through periods of my life where my friends have known me better than members of my family have. And I should imagine that's very true if you're slightly estranged from your family due to not being accepted and things like that. So that's something that care homes could definitely look into, doesn't it?
And your friends most probably know you better, because you will share some of the difficulties that you might have faced, which you wouldn't necessarily do with your family, because then you think your family will come marching in and take over. I mean, there was lots of things that went on between John and I that I could never, ever talk about. But I think friends realised, but family didn't, because, when my mum and dad were alive, they were fine. But there were distant relations that didn't understand all that went on in our relationship. And let's face it, no relationship's perfect. It's always going to have its ups and downs and bumps and potholes along the way. But yeah, it's sometimes a bit more difficult to expand on that with your family. You could expand for your nearest and dearest friends who are most probably like-minded, because they would be members of the LGBT community, so it was most probably easier. So yes, it can be difficult at times. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that, again, having a higher sense of inclusivity with the community and things like that would open up those conversations and things like that, wouldn't it? And as well as you said, getting wills sorted and getting advanced care plans sorted wherever possible. Like, who do you want to be listened to when it comes to your care and well-being? Who does know you best? And making sure that's, explicitly informed to the people who need to know about it.
I now live in North Yorkshire. My nearest family member is my late brother's wife. She lives over in Morecambe. My other brother is still alive, lives down in Salisbury in Wiltshire. All my cousins are down on the south coast. So yes, I'm home alone. Nobody loves me.
I'm sure that's not true. But you're building an amazing community around you at the moment with Dementia Forward and stuff like that. I know they speak very fondly of you and the work that you're doing with them.
Well,
100%.
They're a great team to do things with. And although I won the Diversity and Dementia Award at the Dementia in Care Awards, I can't do that on my own. And as I've told them, it's all about teamwork. Yes, all right, I might spearhead it, but I can't do it unless I've got good support and people that are well-meaning behind me. So it's as much theirs as it is mine. It's currently residing in a glass case down at Dementia Forward, and I've told them I've got a pride flag behind it. So...
So obviously you just mentioned there again that you received this award and national recognition for the work you're doing and the awareness that you're raising. But just to kind of draw us to a bit of a close on this, what would you say like real success would look like for you?
Real success for me would be training packages, mandatory, accredited, LGBT awareness in the main, for all healthcare providers. It doesn't matter whether it's care at home, care in a hospital, care in a care home. Anybody that's providing healthcare has a good understanding of where the LGBT community has come from in particular, and just to be respectful and appreciate that no two of us really are made the same. We're all different, and it's all very well providing a standard care package, but we just need to make sure that the edges are a bit more woolly so that they can take in others and make sure that they're there. So yes, I think that's my key aim, is to make sure that LGBT awareness training is accredited and mandatory for all healthcare providers. Yeah,
absolutely. One of those areas that I think I've done a lot of equality and diversity
and to be involved.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But yeah, I've done a lot of, equality, diversity and inclusion training over the years. And it's one of those areas that I've always touched on. But there were some real bits that I'd never thought of before, particularly around the kind of the transgender community as an example, for instance, of, somebody who's been through the transition and then where are they potentially going to be going to when they're experiencing and living with dementia, and how are staff going to navigate that? And it was something that, it's going to be, as you said, that the population that was still in that criminalized stage of homosexuality are now moving into the elderly care setting more and more. And there's going to be a lot of people who've been through difficult sense of identity and acceptance and things at various stages on the journey. So I think it is something that, we can't sweep under the carpet. It needs to have some attention paid to it now. Prepare.
The majority of youngsters, and speaking from my own experience, at something like about age 14, I realised, A, I didn't want to get married, and B, I didn't want children. Now, I had no role models in those days as to know what that meant, but I just knew at 14 that was two things I did not want to do. I was something like about 24 or 25 when I had my first gay relationship, and then I sort of realised why I didn't want to get married and have children, and things sort of then plopped into place. But I think for youngsters these days, there are so many good examples of same-sex couples living in harmony, doing all the things that they want to do. And you can follow lots of them on YouTube in particular. There's some wonderful examples. And I would encourage youngsters that might be struggling to come to terms with their sexuality, go and visit some of these websites and get some advice and guidance from these people, because it really is eye-opening. It really is.
Mm. Yeah, I think we all struggle with the journey of acceptance, but there's certain parts of the community that, there is still stigma, there is still fears, there's still family opinions and things like that are really going to influence it 100%. So, well, thank you so much for sharing your story, Neil, and obviously the story of John as well, that you both went through, and keep up the good work. I think it is important, and acceptance universally, acceptance and empathy are two things that I'm constantly working towards people with no matter what community, but it's good to hear some specifics.
Health and safety and manual handling and hazard regulations and all the other things that we have to do. It just needs to be part of that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. So
you're more than welcome. Thank you.
If anybody who has been watching this episode has found the information useful, informative, or maybe you know some people that would benefit from actually having this topic kind of flagged to them as something that maybe they ought to be paying attention to, or if you're a care organisation, then please reach out to Dementia Forward or to Able Training or to Neil himself. There'll be details in the description or in the show notes so you can find where to find all of us. But otherwise, thank you again, Neil. And please like, comment and share.